This is where I went to school. Elementary to be precise, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, even back then, I was a nerd. I remember sitting over there, snowstorm or sunshine, playing Pokemon on my Game Boy Color. Right over there sat the even nerdier kids, talking about some dumb game called Kingdom Hearts or something. Right here were the cool kids, a year up, who played Counter-Strike on their Dell Pentium 2s. But over there sat the really cool kids. The kids I always wanted to approach, to be like, but never dared. They played everything you'd never heard of before, titles I still to this day don't know if they actually existed. But one. I remember hearing of a sword-wielding, gun-toting anti-hero called Dante. I remember hearing of Devil May Cry. And today I feel pretty cool.
I was 7 years old when I received my first video games console. That Christmas has honestly never been topped, and I'm completely fine if it never is. A shiny brand new PlayStation 2 bundled with a copy of Star Wars Starfighter. It didn't matter to me that it met middling reviews, my eyes were glued to the screen, loving every second of it. But that wasn't the only thing in the box. Also bundled in with the console was a demo disc. Long since lost to time, but I vividly remember that when I got bored ripping up the one rally stage available in WRC and beating the 2 Klonoa 2 levels on the disc, there was also a number of promotional teasers, the vast majority of which I have completely forgotten, but one.
The included trailer for Devil May Cry was insane. At least that's how 7-year-old me saw it, and how now 29-year-old me remembers it. In my mind, it's so ridiculously over the top that it feels unreal. I remember some woman busting through doors on a race bike, and then some guy shoots it back at her with his handgun. There's no way I'm remembering this correctly. This is gonna be a good game.
Devil May Cry didn't start out as Devil May Cry, however. When Resident Evil mastermind Shinji Mikami wanted a new blockbuster entry, he looked to the director of one of the most heralded survival horror games of all time, Hideki Kamiya. In what was supposed to be Resident Evil 4, Kamiya and his team set out in a completely different direction. Instead of the claustrophobic static cameras and the pre-rendered background the series was known for, a more dynamic camera system was adopted, and before you knew it, the snowball of spectacle action had started rolling. The developers yearned to create something else, something deemed too far for Resident Evil, something deemed too cool. This is the coolest guy I have ever seen.
In the epicenter of this cool factor that Kamiya wanted to achieve was a single character. A single character that 7-year-old me would have adored. A single character by the name of Dante.
Character design of the early 2000s didn't lack memorable entries. Jak and Daxter in their precursor Legacy, Raiden in his seagull-filled romp through the Big Shell, and Max Payne and his love for mixing prescription drugs and old-fashioned are only mentioning a select few. But no matter how deep your search goes, Dante filled a niche that had previously been relatively unexplored.
There had been countless cool characters before. Besides the ones already mentioned, you need only look at any of the Final Fantasies to find another. The mold wasn't cast around Dante, but you could make the argument that he was the first one to truly break it.
The first Devil May Cry starts out just like the demo disc. A leather-clad woman, later introduced as Trish, busts through Dante's devil hunting shop on her race bike, where Dante drops the iconic
"Whoa, slow down, babe."
Look, I'm almost happy I didn't play this when I was a kid. If young me would have stared at Dante while blasting the Black Parade, I don't think any amount of black nail polish would have satiated me.
Dante, however, isn't just a cool guy. Despite running a demon hunting Etsy store, he's also part demon, because if it wasn't already clear, Earth in Dante Town isn't exactly the Earth you and I are used to. Earth in Dante Town is kinda wacky. Dante is the son of a demon named Sparta, a demon that 2000 years ago betrayed his own in order to save humanity. A move certified to make even your closest friend into mortal enemies, and so it did. Ruler of the underworld, Mundus got kinda fed up with his old buddy Sparta, and a clash of the ages took place, ending when Dante's old man sealed Mundus off, effectively saving humanity forever.
Like any old video game, the backstory is presented to you before you get into the action. Except this is the font they used, and this is the background they used. Now, I don't know anything about design or whatever. It's a little hard to read, though.
Trish turns out to be good, and the whole sword through heart and motorcycle on head was just a test to see if Dante really was Dante. Which he was. Well, I could have told you that. As it turns out, because it wouldn't really be much of a video game without it, Mundus is back, and Dante is the only chance to seal him away again, at least according to Trish, who, because she allegedly bears a striking resemblance to his mother, Dante listens to.
This is where the game starts. Dante is sent over to where evil itself is being resurrected, the fictional Malay Island. You didn't really need to know it was fictional, right? Like everything else had been so believable, you might be surprised. Malay Island is not real.
Playing this in 2023, you'd expect your first steps as Dante to feel clunky and laborious, or maybe so floaty you lose any tangible feedback to the character. But it doesn't. For a 20-plus-year-old game, it feels ridiculously tight. The more dynamic camera twists and swings around as you get to grips with the control, letting you bounce around with ease in no time. Which, when analyzed, shouldn't really surprise you. The PS2, even early on in its life cycle, had some insanely well-controlling protagonists, and that Dante falls right in among them doesn't take anything away from him. Why does everyone in this game look like an extra from an AFI music video? I'm not complaining, but it has like reawakened something in me. As you progress through Malay Island, that intro sequence sticks with you. I mean, it's impossible for it not to when the rest of the game plays out like this.
What a big surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
What does that mean, Dante?
Devil May Cry is ridiculous. It's nigh on stupid in the best possible way. You can, without too much effort, see the Resident Evil roots if you look for them, but it's always jacked up to 11. The camera is like the evil twin of the one from Raccoon City, landing in Dutch angles and producing confusing perspectives more often than not. Kamiya uses it not only as a necessary aspect of presenting the action, but as a framing device for it. Allowing the camera to nestle in corners, nooks, and crannies might seem disorientating, and to an extent it is, but it allows for one thing.
It makes stuff look really cool.
And really, that's the one thing Devil May Cry is about. You can make the argument that they set out to build a balanced action game, tell a heartfelt story, or create a decade-spanning genre, and maybe you'd even be right. But if there's one thing that's inescapable, it's that they laser-focused on one element: to make you feel cool. Dante's journey through Malay Island sees you square up against everything from a giant spider spewing lava and an even more giant griffin with like 3 heads and a hole in its shit. See, everything about it is cool. After facing countless abominations, your own brother trapped in a dark demon cosplay and just ooze, your old pal Trish reveals herself to be bad, having lured Dante to Malay Island for Mundus' bidding, but not for long, because as Trish, soon after revealing her evil plan, is set to be crushed by debris, Dante saves her, because she looks like his mother.
That's the only reason he gives. And, well, I'm satisfied.
This completely selfless act wins Trish over, but Dante remains kinda mad at her for the whole betrayal bit. Good old dad killer Mundus, in the meantime, is plotting his big move, and whilst Dante is busy being Dante, he uses Trish as a lure to get to him. This whole friends but also enemies, but actually really just friends now dance repeats itself again as Trish sacrifices herself to allow Dante to defeat Mundus in a very PS2 boss fight. Coming back from Mundus' realm, we lay our eyes on the lifeless corpse of Trish, and Devil May Cry does its darndest to tug at your heartstrings.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
I never played DMC when I was a kid. The closest I got was that demo disc, an experience that in and of itself felt too surreal to be representative of the whole adventure. But now that I've actually seen what Dante's Wild Ride has to offer, that trailer was like kind of restrained.
DMC is over the top, ridiculous, and in some aspects, infallibly stupid. It understands the way young me yearned for being cool with such precision that even though that disc never actually took a spin in my PS2, you could have fooled me.
Jackpot.
The legacy DMC and Dante left after their initial entry is still felt today, being widely agreed upon as one of the greatest PS2 games ever released, and with its cult status only growing larger every passing year. I would be lying if I said it's my favorite genre, and experiencing that first outing for the first time in the early 2020s, it's hard not to notice the rough edges. But it is impossible not to look past them.
Now I think it's safe to say I was excited to continue Dante's journey, to sit down and experience what Capcom had managed to cook up with all the success and everything they learned from the first game. Well, for those of you who've played it before, you know what's coming, and for those of you who haven't, welcome to hell.
Devil May Cry 2 starts out pretty good.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It starts out terribly. All the character that Dante had is gone, and instead we get this boring, dark, mysterious Dante who admittedly has a pretty cool jacket. In fact, that was like all I saw when I researched this game. Try to look up which version to get. Don't play it. The only good thing is Dante has a cool jacket. Does it run on modern PCs? Don't bother. Dante's jacket is the best part. Is it even good? Either the jacket is so good or the game is so bad and allegedly cool jacket is the only saving grace. I think you see where I'm going with this one.
The original Devil May Cry set itself apart from its competition in a number of different ways, but one of the most memorable was its arsenal. Dante could wield a plethora of exotic devil arms throughout his journey across Malay Island, and despite consisting of demon swords and fire-breathing dragon knuckles, the combo that featured most heavily in the marketing was his signature sword and double pistols. Again, anything to make you feel as cool as possible. The entire combat experience was designed around this combo, a close-range melee weapon and a ranged supplement, allowing the player to attack with each of them with the press of a button constantly at their fingertips created a style of play previously unexplored. Spectacle action relies on just that, spectacle, and to say that Devil May Cry was anything but would be a lie.
And this isn't just me saying the combat in DMC 1 felt cool, everyone thought so, which is why you'd think that'd be a thing they'd carry over, right? First one broke new ground and was universally loved, so it'd be stupid not to bring that back for the second one, right?
Right, but, and hear me out here, what if they made it a gun game? And when I say gun game, I don't mean a gun game like Tarkov or Black where you need to think around engagements, plan loadouts, and be at one with your firearm. I mean a gun game. Game's good. It's a good game. Nah, it's good. Having a lot of fun. This game is good. It's good. Nah, this game is good. This game is good. Good balance, fun game. It's a good game. Game's good.
If you've never played DMC 2, you might think I'm nitpicking here, right? But bar like 2 occasions when you need to use your sword, going full gun guy mode isn't just possible, it's like the most effective way of playing the game. I love it.
It's an absolute train wreck. Everything that made DMC 1 so memorable is gone in the sequel. The charismatic, over-the-top Dante is, as mentioned, replaced with brooding sad guy number 5, and the detailed castle halls of Malay Island are swapped out for bland-looking environments and dull-looking enemies. This, the 300th Pula I've shot that I can't even see. This is a good game, this. Almost all of these perceived failures can be attributed to its development, which, unlike the debut, was spearheaded by another studio within Capcom. With original director Kamiya being appointed to other projects, the series took a wild turn, and this new team lacked both manpower and know-how in the genre. With half a year remaining until the scheduled release date and the game being nowhere near completion, it was clear something had to be done. Hideaki Itsuno, later going on to direct modern-day classic Dragon's Dogma, was appointed the new director of the project and immediately had to start putting out fires. He said himself that the final days of development on DMC 2 were wild.
But no matter how much development hell you go through, how much strife your ideas go up against, and how much you're sent in to fix with no time, nothing, not a single thing but pure, unadulterated insanity can lead to the design of DMC 2's best enemy, infested tank.
Yeah, a game that had you fight through medieval castles, battle ancient demonic knights and mythical beasts, now plop you in the middle of Chicago going up against an M1 Abrams with a tentacle and an eyeball coming out of it.
I love it. It absolutely rocks.
And it doesn't stop here either. DMC2 features some of the most strange creations when it comes to enemy designs ever conceived. An aspect that in and of its own wouldn't have been too weird, but when you factor in that if there was one thing that the original didn't lack, it was intriguing adversary design, it becomes stranger by the minute. Okay. So we're just fighting a helicopter. I don't know what to say anymore. This game rocks. The game isn't good. It was widely regarded as a disappointment when it came out, and the average score reflects that pretty well even 20 years later. The troubled development can be felt all throughout, and very few, if any, of the changes in tone help the overall experience, especially for the countless fans of the original.
And yet, I'm gonna say it. I unironically love this game. There's just something so fun about Devil May Cry 2. Not fun in the sense that you're completely immersed in whatever is happening or you're trying with all your might to beat a difficult opponent, but fun in the sense that you're just completely bewildered. I'm sitting here in the same sofa I did beating DMC 1, but despite that game throwing every mythological beast it had at me, nothing gets me quite as dumbfounded as whatever this is.
What? What's their plan here? Huh? It's riveting gameplay. What was their plan? I guess it was just like a dog. There are periods of DMC2 that are unapologetically bad. Stretches of the game that are so completely non-engaging that just not falling asleep should be an achievement in and of itself. These periods are most of the game, filled with enemies that you can shoot, stronger enemies that you can shoot, mini bosses that you can shoot, regular bosses that you can you understand the concept of shoot. But despite all of these shortcomings, I'm all in.
This isn't me saying you should go out and play Devil May Cry 2 or reevaluate your previous stance on it, because you shouldn't. The game is horrible, one of the worst games I've ever played, but that said, I still loved going through it. DMC2 is one of my favorite experiences. Not because it's good, because it isn't. If someone truthfully says that is what they believe, they are out of their mind. It's the only objectively wrong opinion. But it is funny. And the question just becomes if you're able to stomach it for long enough to leave you with a positive impression of the whole thing. I could, and it's hilarious. As for that cool jacket, hold on. I think I've got a thing for this. Well, you know what they say, it's always darkest just before the dawn, and for Devil May Cry fans, I doubt you could get much darker than Devil May Cry 2. Could have sworn it was around here somewhere. I actually remember reading about Devil May Cry 3 when it came out. Seemed like a cool game at the time, and the local games magazine that you picked up at the corner electronics shop really liked it. I didn't play it though, I was too busy learning how to reach the orange button on Guitar Hero. Now though,
you're gonna pay for that.
This is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever done. Do I have to wear this?
Yeah, you do.
Man, I'm not gonna be held responsible for what might happen. Who the fuck am I?
Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening released in 2005 to an audience that, while still loving the original, had grown a little trepidatious because of that lackluster second entry. This extended to DMC2 director Hideaki Itsuno himself, who, having effectively been set up to fail, felt unsatisfied, and so asked the Capcom brass to let him direct the sequel, to do right by the franchise from the start this time.
Invitation, huh?
Dante was back, And it didn't take long for people to fall in love with the character all over again. This time, however, we weren't playing the same Dante as before. He wasn't the cool and composed devil hunter we were used to. DMC3 was a prequel, taking place years and years before the original. This Dante was brash, juvenile, and too cocky for his own good. This Dante was even more Dante.
When people came home, however, ready to experience this next installment, an installment that had been praised to high heavens by critics all over the globe, they were hit with a shocking revelation. At least the Americans were.
You see, with the release of DMC3, Capcom did a little trolling. For the Japanese and European audiences, their difficulty labeled normal did exactly what it said on the tin, but for the Americans, that difficulty was really the hard difficulty for the rest of the world, which is crazy and very funny.
People found it difficult, very difficult, and it quickly gained a reputation for being ridiculously unforgiving. So much so that when Capcom later released the special edition in early 2006, the difficulties had been retuned. On a global level this time.
With that being said, Capcom couldn't help themselves from being little shits. Imagine you're a new player in 2006. You hear this new DMC3 game comes out and it's pretty good, so you save up your allowance for an entire year and rush to your local game store to buy it. There you find this brand new special edition, so you buy it, rush home and plop it in your PS2 and are presented with this screen. You feel like you need more info before you make a decision, huh? Gold or yellow? We don't have all day.
This choice is just this, gold or yellow. If you've never played DMC3 before, you might be like me, assume this is some arbitrary visual setting. After all, there's literally no explanation as to what this is supposed to adjust even today. But you'd be wrong, just as Capcom intended. This game is like hard. The setting refers to the orbs in the game, the same orbs that control how the game treats you if you die, which if you don't know what this setting means, you will. Choosing gold implements checkpoints before bosses and allows instant respawns by the use of gold orbs, while if you made the horrible crime of liking yellow a bit more, if you succumb to the endless threats present in Dante's adventure, you'd have to restart the entire level.
Now I can hear the turbo nerds out there yelling that you should play on yellow and it doesn't really matter and it'll be good for your ability, but that's completely besides the point. You have to agree that presenting a choice as pivotal as this, like this, is crazy. Maybe that fits then.
Well, this is my kind of rain. No wonder the sky looks so funny today.
DMC3 is, as previously mentioned, a prequel taking place X years before the original game. And as young, shirtless Dante is finishing up the setup of his startup demon hunting shop, a bald man named Arkham arrives on Dante's brother's Vergil's account, inviting him to a brotherly clash. Soon before long, the city is filled with demons, and your regularly scheduled hack and slash video game is laid out before you.
Except it really isn't that regularly scheduled. DMC3 was, and still is today, widely regarded as one of the greatest games to come out in the genre. And when that genre is one you helped create, it's a little crazy. Maybe that does fit then.
Following the formula very much laid forward by DMC1, the game sees you climb Vergil's demon tower, defeating seemingly endless waves of enemies and with now iconic bosses granting you new weapons. All the while, Dante is once again back at it, oozing with personality and spewing catchphrases that toe the line between careless cool guy and cringe mall ninja.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Exactly like 7-year-old me would have wanted it. The now signature blend of melee combat with a secondary firearm makes its natural return, and with the expanded combat system featuring 4 distinct styles, your options for tackling Dante's Inferno are wider than ever before. Despite not reaching the highs of gun game mania as the second one, turns out making the game fun to play was a worthwhile decision.
Your journey takes you to the most unlikely places, even for a series as off the wall as DMC. You end up fighting Cerberus, making friends with a lady in love with her rocket launcher, and getting swallowed up by a giant whale. All in all, a little crazy. I think it's time we get into that.
Anytime I think about DMC3 and what I experienced going through it, I can't help but to land on that word. crazy. If the reference point is Resident Evil, and when that is jacked up to 11, it's DMC1, DMC3 is so far off the scale that the Voyagers just lost a record. Everything in it is insane. Crazy. It's like director Itsuno, after the disappointment of DMC2, treated this game as his personal vendetta. But as soon as they cleared the bar of ridiculousness set by the previous entries, they just kept going until someone said it was release day. Dante's moveset, regardless of style choice, is always over the top, as lavish as possible, and often completely disregarding function over form just to look good doing it, which happens to be just as 7-year-old me would have wanted it. The game oozes style, just like the initial entry, but expanded, refined to the level where if in DMC1 you couldn't help but to see the jagged edges, here you can run your hand along it for as long as you please without getting as much as a splinter. This atmosphere is what ties the game together. Every single aspect on screen or off is committed to being as over the top as possible, but never letting you feel out of control. A natural evolution for the series, and cementing crazy as a hallmark for it.
As for the characters, well, I'm sure you can imagine. We've already talked at length about Dante. Cool jacket, bad haircut. Does remind me of someone. We briefly mentioned Arkham, the bald gentleman with more character twists than I can count. The lady in love with a rocket launcher turns out to just be one to refer to as that lady, all of which are as memorable as the last, and I'm not even mentioning the bosses. But right at the top of the Timony Gru, that's the name of the giant demon tower you're climbing. I just added that line in here so that the turbo nerds don't think I'm a fake fan or something. Wouldn't want that, eh? Right at the top stands but one man, the antithesis and blood brother of Dante, Vergil, and emo personified.
If Dante was the character that 7-year-old me would have loved, Vergil is with me after finding The Ghost of You by My Chemical Romance and listening to it for a straight 4 days, would have hailed as a god. The guy suffers from such main character syndrome that as soon as he's on screen, if Dante wasn't Dante, I'm sure he would have just resigned and believed it too. I mean, the same thing could have been said about the game's developers, who, when deciding to release the difficulty tuning special edition, completely forgot who the series is supposed to be about and decided to just let you play as Vergil if you wanted. Which we all did. Can you imagine if a Star Wars game came out and alongside letting you play as Luke, they also let you play as Darth Vader? Straight from the get-go, go buck wild. You'd love it. I would love it. But it is, for the lack of a better word, a little crazy. Now, we've established that the main thing holding DMC3 together is craziness. That's not too crazy. But there is one more element. An element so important that without it, the insane would fade into mundane. In order to have light, you must have dark. And in order to have superficial lunacy, you must contrast it with sincerity.
So, this is what they call a heartwarming family reunion, eh? You got that right.
In the game's final scenes, finally pitting brother against brother, or brother against himself if you played as Vergil, a game that has through every entry flirted with showing genuine emotion, finally goes all in. When Arkham turns out to possess power previously unimagined, the brothers put aside their differences for a moment and fight as a duo. An emotional moment told through gameplay, with Vergil complimenting your moves as if the brothers had never been apart. It feels right.
The bond between Vergil and Dante is something almost everyone with a sibling can relate to, and even if the stakes in this demon world are a little higher than who gets the last Oreo or who gets to decide which episode of Sailor Moon is put on, whether the fight is over an all-conquering demon sword or a Digimon VHS tape is unimportant. If something else is threatening the world order, nothing's stopping you. But as soon as that's dealt with, that cookie is mine, sister.
The game's ultimate fight is just what you've been waiting for. Brother versus brother, and really difficult. When the world's been saved from Arkham, all bets are off. It's a family matter at this point, and one that is not going to end until one of them falls.
No one can have this, Dante. It's mine. It belongs to a son of Sparta. Leave me and go, if you don't want to be trapped in the demon world. I'm staying. This place was our father's home.
It's one thing to make people feel for lifelike characters, situations that mirror our own and strifes we go up against in our day-to-day, but to make characters so much larger than life instill a genuine feeling of sadness when they perish, and better yet, when that character is your nemesis, is nothing short of a characterization masterclass. Because after hours and hours, attempt after attempt, feeling like you're going up against a brick wall, finally reaching the end, I can't help but for it to feel bittersweet. And that is crazy.
Devil May Cry.
Nope. Nope. God damn it, why can't it just be like a normal guy? With great power comes great responsibility. It's just a sword. How powerful can it be? Well, while we're here, we might as well make the most of it. It's 2008, the Xbox 360 is the hottest platform in the world, and after 3 years of being AWOL, Dante is back.
Except he isn't. After the series high of Devil May Cry 3 having reached the top of Game of the Year lists the globe over, people were back on the bandwagon. When Capcom announced that the newest installment featuring Dante and his devil hunting entourage would be released on the next generation of consoles, people were rightfully excited. Most players had seen what the jump from standard definition to an at the time labeled HD 720p had done to their favorite franchises. Halo 3 had set the world ablaze, Half-Life 2's second episode reignited the love for Valve, and The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was still making waves even 2 years after its release. So when Devil May Cry 4 finally released in 2008, people were disappointed.
Because once again, Capcom couldn't help themselves from being little shits. When players fired up their brand new DMC4, they were greeted by a brand new white-haired hero. And not only that, but with Dante as their main antagonist.
In 2001, Konami released Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, a follow-up to the immense phenomena in Metal Gear Solid 1, a game with a following unlike almost anything else present within the games industry at the time. People were ecstatic to once again step into the sneaking suit of Solid Snake a whole console generation later, but bar a brief, albeit mind-blowing intro sequence, players found themselves playing the rest of the game as a new character. Raiden, a character that series director Hideo Kojima and publisher Konami had kept secret and completely absent from any marketing material leading up to the release. And people hated Raiden. The outcry and downright disgust from players when the fact sunk in is one of the most memorable periods of time in games industry history, and is still often referenced when talking about unpredictable twists in game design.
With all that in mind, it's easy to see in which direction the little troll neurons of the Capcom developers were firing, but it's also important to note they were doing their best to not be little shits this time. The last trailers before release all showed the brand new hero, but they also showed Dante. And people love Dante.
The new character was, despite a formidable fighter in his own right, almost a polar opposite of what Dante was. At least as much of a polar opposite as it's permitted in the every single person is insane universe that DMC takes place. Much like the universally loved and adored Raiden from MGS2, Nero was less battle-hardened than his compatriot, more insecure in the face of adversity, and carried with him a huge weak spot: love.
Capcom had, with the advent of the 7th console generation, established an environment to not only expand upon what the fundamental core features of DMC was, but also tell a heartfelt story.
It would be doing a disservice to the writers at Capcom to say that previous Devil May Cry games didn't feature a lovingly written story, but you need only a brief look at any of the game's forums to see that for the majority of players, the story wasn't what led them to or kept them playing DMC. And so when Capcom set out to tell a story starting out at ground level with inexperienced Nero at the helm and with emotions like love and loss taking the stage alongside your signature brash jokes and one-liners, it was a paradigm shift for the series, and I really liked it.
Players at the time, and probably still to this day, complained that Nero was whiny, scared, and pathetic, and he is all of those things, and more. As pathetic as you can be while doing backflips with a greatsword. But for me, Nero offered something that, up to that point, Dante hadn't been able to. Character development.
The Dante we played in DMC 1, 2, and 3 were all very different personas, and his evolution felt like a natural progression, but most of his character development took place in between the games. Nero might be a terrified little baby when you first press start, but the Nero you embody at the end is a different person, not only through unlocked abilities, but through the story you've endured together. The story is, to entrenched veterans, maybe a little surface level, lacking some of the overarching themes of the established familial rivalry, but as an entry point for new players, it does that pretty well. Your journey as Nero revolves around one main thing: to protect the ones you love, as everything around you falls apart. A task almost ripping him to pieces and leads to some incredibly emotional scenes as he comes to terms with why he is the way he is. If Dante was the person I would have loved as a 7-year-old and Vergil was who sat on my shoulder while I was printing out tabs for Anthem of Her Dying Day, Nero, in a sense, is just young me.
This isn't me saying that, despite what some of the comments online might be insinuating, that DMC 4 isn't a DMC game through and through. I might be putting story and narrative above gameplay, but Capcom didn't. Hold on. I think I can visualize this. This is a sword, a weapon synonymous with the medieval period and one we've been using for the last 3 games. But how do you go about making it modern? How do you go about making it exciting? Do you maybe add a gun sword, a sword gun? Or do you maybe add a chainsaw, a set of rotating teeth for maximum searing damage potential? Or do you maybe, just maybe, add one of these? A motorcycle twist throttle grip so you can rev up your sword for more damage output. Now I know which one I would choose, and I told you DMC hadn't lost its edge.
I guess this doesn't quite cut it.
That fucking rocks. I love Nero. While Devil May Cry 4 isn't the first time you play as a character other than Dante,
Yeah, okay, that one's on me. You do play as another character in DMC 2, if you want to. Lucia, she's like a clone or something. Look, there's a reason I haven't gotten into the story in this video, and I know I just got done saying I like the story, and I do, but truth be told, not a whole lot of it really matters in the grand scheme of things, and Lucia is in DMC 2, so none of that matters.
Nero might be a crying little baby at the start, but you'd be forgiven for not seeing that in these clips. Playing as Nero is smooth. It's a testament to how good your gameplay designers are when immediately as you're thrust into Nero's shoes, it feels right. Nero's way of fighting is fundamentally different from the Dante we've gotten so used to, or any of his combat styles, but the game still manages to not miss a beat. A completely new moveset consisting of grabs, charged shots, and the aforementioned motorcycle blade is presented to you, and instantly it just clicks, which is handy considering your first opponent is none other than Dante.
Back to being little shits, huh?
The tone of the game's setting or story might not hit home with series veterans, but most people would tend to agree that at the core of DMC4 is a remarkably well-developed combat experience. And this isn't even mentioning when you actually get to play as Dante.
I'm gaslighting myself here. In my mind, I'm going, yeah, no, it's fine if you don't like DMC4. It's a little harder to love. Nero he's a little tougher to love than Dante, but Dante is in the game. And not only in the game, you play as Dante. Half the game, you play as Dante. Like, will you turbo race? That was uncalled for. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But you know I'm right.
The second half of the game is essentially the first half of the game, but you're going in reverse and you do play as Dante. And even though Nero is a force to be reckoned with and one that feels just as polished as our main guy, it feels good to be back as Dante, even if his fashion sense in this one is questionable.
Listen.
Dante's moveset is one bit classic, one bit refined, and he's still the walking epitome of cool. In fact, Dante in Devil May Cry 4 might be my favorite version of the character yet, because no matter what fight he finds himself in, his punchline is always just gun. Playing DMC4 is undoubtedly playing a DMC game. Ridiculously difficult if you want it to be, tonally all over the place but always crazy. Despite the mixed reception, you'd be hard-pressed to find many not recognizing it as a solid entry for the genre.
Which is where I have a confession to make. I don't like the genre. I came to the same conclusion when playing through Kingdom Hearts, and despite me loving that game because of the story, I do so in spite of its gameplay, not because of it. I recognize that every DMC game, except 2, is a masterpiece in terms of its gameplay design, and I respect the developers immensely for being able to pull it off, but it's still not my kind of thing. Which is why I really like DMC4.
The game sincerely tries to get me to come along on its adventure. It doesn't care that I'm still new and that I'm very far from the target audience, or that I am, after 3 previous games, still so incredibly bad. It still goes, come on, let's figure it out, let's have fun. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
You got a jacked up notion of fair play, pal.
I love it.
It's beginning to piss me off.
The sincerity flows through the entire experience for me. The characters, their individual storylines and developments, the way the gameplay is framed and presented, and through the way you as a player are included straight from the start. Because while DMC3 is a masterwork, few games can claim to truly challenge, its presentation as an unforgiven rock-hard death simulator is DMC4's opposite. And the contrast in a series to present both sides of this coin in subsequent entries is as powerful as it is rare. But because Capcom is Capcom, they can't help themselves from bookending a sincere coming-of-age story like this.
Then you gotta take it out from the inside.
Devil May Cry 4 is great. I'll die on this hill if I have to. Nero's story is thrilling and his character development is thoroughly engaging. The contrast between the regular DMC nonsense and heartfelt sincerity is striking. Speaking of striking, I think it's time we get up to speed.
Devil May Cry 4 released to a mixed reception in 2008. To many people, the height of the series was still the third entry, forever remaining a pillar of the genre. The franchise went quiet, and despite rumors popping up from time to time, no clear sequel was announced. Longtime director Hideaki Itsuno went on to direct that mentioned modern-day classic, Dragon's Dogma, and claimed it was a game he'd been dreaming of making since his school days. It said, hope is the last thing that leaves the human body. And as time went on...
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, no, I did 4. Yeah, that's done. I'm on my way to do the new one now. The one that released in like 2019 or whatever. Do I have to? Like, no one can. Yeah. Yeah, sure. No. Yeah. Yeah, talk to you later.
The games industry changed rapidly with the advent of the 7th console generation. Developers got a significant bump in both graphical and memory capacity, and bigger, more blockbuster games quickly found themselves not only being more feasible to be produced, but also jumping off the shelves. DMC4 was the series' first venture with these bumped specs, and despite the mixed reaction, it sold well, but not well enough. Capcom deemed it a failure, comparing it to previous entries, and in 2013...
Okay, we gotta be quiet, but there is another DMC game. A game so controversial that just acknowledging its existence is a risk to your own. In 2013, after reported disappointing sales of DMC4, Capcom contacted Western studio Ninja Theory to reboot the franchise. A reboot that overhauled most established elements and changed main character Dante considerably. The previous games had all been edgy, that was kind of the bread and butter for the franchise, but the reboot doubled down on this element to the extreme. The game split the fanbase into people who absolutely hated it and those who didn't, but regardless of your stance, most people would agree that it didn't really get what made DMC so good. Now, am I being overly dramatic, sitting here in the middle of the night whispering about an Xbox 360 title that some people didn't love? Yes, of course I am. That's kind of the point. I'm also wearing a wig and coat, I've got guns and a sword. That's kind of the whole thing about the franchise. It's a series that thrives on the overly dramatic. Everything is exaggerated to the obscene, and its characters are not only larger than life, but giants of the industry. Whether you played DMC growing up or not, most people who grew up around video games can name Dante in an instant, and most of them can't do it without smiling. Just a little. Speaking of smiling, I think it's time we wrap this up.
Devil May Cry.
Hey, Nico?
Don't lose your tits. I see him.
Hey, you have to hit every single bump in the road? Gonna ruin my crew!
DMC 5 is good.
Fans of the original Dante had been kept waiting for a long time. From 2008 to 2018, bar a special edition of DMC4, nothing had happened until that summer. Xbox were winding down their presentation at the Electronic Entertainment Expo, and when the PA system calmly announced world premiere, followed by the trailer, you could not help but to smile. DMC had returned, and to anyone watching the trailer familiar with the franchise, it was clear. This was no quick cash-in, this was the real deal. The rebooted DMC from 2013 had grown to an accepted neat little hack and slash for fans of the genre, but where that game missed the mark of what DMC really was, this seemed to be heading straight for it. It was clear that the team both at Xbox and Capcom were very excited to show off what they had been cooking up, and seeing longtime series director Hideaki Itsuno on stage announcing the game like,
"Thank you so much. DMC is back."
you could not help but to smile.
When the game, a year later, finally did release, it was clear from the get-go that DMC 5 was not only an extremely competent video game, but for many fans it was the first time that the question of what game in the franchise really was the best was really worth asking again.
The reviews were as unanimous as they could realistically be and praised every single aspect of the game. The combat gameplay loop had never been DMC's weak side, except maybe that one time, but the expanded combat arsenal for all 3 of the main characters took it to new heights. The cast, consisting of brand new entries that quickly gained fan approval as well as returning heroes, fleshed out the experience to create an installment that truly felt like an evolution. Gameplay-wise, it was tight. Playing as returning Nero and longtime Daddy Dante felt, if even possible, better than ever before, while new mysterious Hot Guy V offered a brand new playstyle that, while forcing you to look at combat encounters differently, still felt fundamentally DMC.
That said, well, I think we know by now, that's not why I'm here.
I have played games adjacent to character action games all my life. One of the first games I rented for the PS2 I so excitedly unboxed that Christmas Eve was the quickly adored Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. And while maybe not being the epitome of the genre as a stepping stone into it, it was invaluable. The journey continued through the original God of War trilogy, weaving its way onto Ninja Gaiden, and after many twists and turns, only last year I finally played through Kingdom Hearts, an experience unlike anything I'd ever had before, and now Devil May Cry.
All these games have one thing in common. They're all praised to high heavens by reviewers using the same terms I've been slinging around in this video. Fun, smooth, exciting, intriguing, and they're all right. All these games share that. They're all gameplay masterworks. That's not why I kept going.
I'm not a gameplay fanatic. I often overlook gameplay, and if the elements around it are good enough, repetitive game design is something I often welcome. I'm not into gameplay, which sounds weird when we're talking about video games, and maybe even more so when we're talking about a series that for many is defined by nothing but its gameplay. I have continued to play video games way longer than many of my school friends because of the experiences the medium offers. I can watch a movie or a TV show, get really into it, but it never sticks with me the way an interactive experience does. I play games for the story, the setting, the art direction, the music, the soundscape, the exploration, the characters, and the gameplay. But it's just a cog in a well-oiled machine, a necessary one, but for me, so are the others. Devil May Cry is that machine. The main cog is its gameplay. That's what most people care about. But without the supporting infrastructure, for me, it would fall apart.
Now, I'm not saying you're wrong for skipping every cutscene or doing challenge runs all day. I do that too. But when a game steps out of its way to offer something more, and when it understands its setting to such an extent that DMC does, I find it impossible not to listen. I find it impossible not to smile.
And regarding that setting, DMC 5 very much is the crowning jewel of the franchise. All the way back in 2001, Devil May Cry 1 managed to break new ground. A game that started as a Resident Evil entry through the eccentric minds of its creators managed to be an instrumental piece in the spawning of an entire genre. A game which focused every single polygon it had at its disposal towards a singular goal: to make you feel cool.
And experiencing Dante for the first time in 2023, I did feel cool. I felt like I was 7 again, and that it had always been a part of my upbringing.
2 years later, Devil May Cry 2 took to the stage, and while not being received or looked back on with as much positivity or excitement, it proved to new series director Hideaki Itsuno that this was special. This was worth making right.
And you can give DMC 2 as much crap as you want. It does deserve it. I still love it though. It's so dumb.
In 2005, when Capcom were set to release one of the most paradigm-shifting games of all time in Resident Evil 4, it would have been easy just to churn out another DMC, to catch the few players not interested in Leon's blockbuster romp through the Spanish countryside. But that wouldn't be very DMC of them now, would it? Instead, Devil May Cry 3 released, and with it, the series was reignited, with 2 of the most engaging characters ever put into pixels.
I grew up idolizing Gordon Freeman and Sly Cooper, but if you had told me I had posters of Dante and Vergil on my bedroom walls, I would have believed you in a second. That's how well they capture what young me loved. And by extension, what old me loves.
Devil May Cry 4 may have been, and even if it's loosened up, still is, divisive. Repetitive design and environments with a main character that didn't click with everyone resulted in a game that, on top of not being released in a complete state, didn't land for everyone. But it did for me.
Playing as Nero, I finally felt like I was getting invited into the franchise. Yes, of course, DMZ 1, 2, and 3 featured tutorial levels letting you get to grips with the controls, but thematically, Nero was almost on the same level. Nero was just me.
The reboot came and went, and without leaving much of a lasting impression, its developers went on to create stunning pieces of art of their own. Time ticked on, but as the series seemed to lay on its deathbed, in 2018, a singular heartbeat in the form of an E3 presentation revitalized the community. And when they then, a year later, finally retreated to Devil May Cry 5, it proved worth the wait.
Have you lost your mind? There's a demon to destroy! Kill yourself later! I'll help!
Devil May Cry is a story about dumb, overdramatic, ridiculous action heroes. That's the most surface-level take you can have about the series. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. Dante, Vergil, Nero, all of them are over the top, cringy, stupid, brash, dumb, and cool as hell. But the story they tell is not. The journey this ensemble has taken you through is easy to dismiss because of the nature of the content that enables it. Bashing demons within one of the most well-designed combat systems in game design history turns out to be addictive, and it's easy to overlook the pencil drawing because of the gilded frame. But the drawing is still there, still a masterpiece, and without it, a frame on its own, is hard to see the point of. Nowhere is this more clear than in the characterization of the main trio. Dante's journey from a juvenile, edgy teenager constantly getting in over his head to a concerned father figure is not a new concept, but when you present it in the way DMC does and still manage to make it seem genuine, it feels human. Vergil might be the constant demon to Dante, forever locked in eternal combat over the fate of the world, but his struggles aren't. His apparent insecurities with identity, belonging, and emotion are anything but. His self-centered demeanor juxtaposed with being the storm that is approaching makes him relatable. It makes him human. Nero is, while being the most literal analog for the player, undoubtedly human from the start. Insecure, scared, emotional, but his journey to, instead of ridding himself of these feelings, understand them and utilize them to grow is even more so.
You taking notes?
Devil May Cry knows what it is. It knows it's ridiculous. It knows it isn't going for a grounded, gritty reality. It knows it's stupid. And with that knowledge firmly grasped, it knows when to push beyond. It knows when to be sincere. It knows when to put aside the demon facade and be human.
This ends right here.
Devil May Cry was never actually a part of my childhood, but it feels like it was. Everything in here is stuff I grew up around. Screaming angst, emo, alt-fashion, listening to MCR while picturing yourself in the music video. Love, loss, constantly towing the line of laughing things off and taking them to heart. DMC is an integral part of me, and without it, I'm not sure I could have ever grown up. Now, if you excuse me, I have a corner to go sit in. What the fuck? Oh, they weren't talking about video games. They were smoking weed!